Hi, this is Peter Schweizer, and welcome to the Drill Down. Did a Chinese psychological operation, or psyop, just cost the United States $1 trillion in a single day? We're going to discuss that today with Eric Ayers, the co-host of this program. Eric, how are you?
I'm okay. Neither one of us are AI experts, so we're going to refrain from getting into the technology behind DeepSeek. But one thing Peter Schweizer is an expert in is his portfolio, and that was impacted yesterday. And so we have a significant stake, literally and figuratively, in discussing this and its ramifications, not just for the U.S. economy, but our national security, Peter Schweizer, because I think, like lots of things, you have to consider what happened in the larger context, not just in terms of the United States and its relationship with China, which we spent a lot of time chronicling on this show, but also just the last week, we're a week away from Donald Trump announcing the United States' own AI startup, and then here comes this DeepSeek thing, and now we're having a very different conversation.
That's right, and this is why I think it's a psychological operation. We're going to unpack what the claim is. Again, we are not AI experts. We're not going to talk about chips. We're not going to talk about the algorithm or the platform. We're going to simply discuss the reality of how this thing unfolded, the claims that were made, the claims that are not true, and why we think the timing is suspicious, and why, in your mind, this is kind of potentially a replay of the lab leak back in 2020.
Yeah, I just think it speaks to China and its posture towards the United States, and ultimately the impact that Chinese products and things that they launch or leak have on this country. You're the one that pointed out that this Chinese AI software deployment cost the United States $1 trillion in market value yesterday.
Yeah.
COVID, for comparison, cost the United States $1.7 trillion over 2 days. By the way, the new CIA director recently told a news outlet that he wants to investigate to fully and finally get behind where the origins of COVID came from. So just consider this. This thing that upended society globally 5 years ago, we still don't have hard answers to.
It's amazing.
But now here comes this Chinese software. We're like, oh yeah, well, we're going to just take their word for this. And it's had a significant impact financially, and who knows what the next months will bring.
Yeah, so why the big disruption? Well, essentially, here's what's happened. The United States tech industry is, of course, enamored with artificial intelligence and has been spending literally tens of billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars when you look at all of it over the course of several years, in this chase to create AI products that can be useful in a variety of ways. Along comes this Chinese company called DeepSeek, which is run effectively by a Chinese hedge fund, by a Chinese investor that runs a hedge fund, who says that they created one of the best AI products, one of the top 5 AI products in capacity, for $5 million. So what happened is everybody said, oh my gosh, Microsoft and Google and all these companies that are spending billions of dollars just got their clocks cleaned by this Chinese company that, by the way, according to the Chinese media, very few people knew about even a couple of months ago. That's what sent the stock prices crashing. Well, a few fact checks on this. Number one, it turns out that apparently that $5 or $6 million figure is actually not quite accurate. According to Barron's, they're reporting that DeepSeek excluded costs related to prior research, ablation experiments on architectures, algorithms, or data. They also excluded the costs of the salaries of their employees and other fixed capital expenditures. So the point is, the numbers aren't even accurate themselves. But here's the other mystery that's surrounding this, and that is this company, DeepSeek itself, which is kind of very mysterious. One could say even kind of dystopian. Looking at the Chinese literature, who, by the way, was very enamored with what had happened. The company behind it is High Flyer. That's the quantitative hedge fund behind DeepSeek. And it set off headlines in China itself. The Daily Economic Times in China said, Silicon Valley shocked, ! Chinese AI dominates foreign media, AI experts say. It has caught up with the U.S., ! Another interesting headline from Xiamen News in China says that DeepSeek Chinese large model technology Avengers team. And they actually have drawings of sort of these Chinese Avengers that are taking on the United States. But it turns out very little is known about this company, even in China, and the timing is suspicious. You talked about the fact that just 6 days before this sort of explosive revelation came forward is when Donald Trump had unveiled a massive program to spend how much money trying to uncover AI?
Yeah, the United States just a week ago announced that they were going to have this program called Stargate, $500 billion worth of private sector investment to fund infrastructure for AI. It was going to create 100,000 jobs. They're going to have data centers all over the country. They had SoftBank CEO Sam Altman was there with OpenAI, and the Oracle chairman Larry Ellison. They're all at the White House. So this is like this big, hey, we're going to the moon. It's an AI moonshot, if you like. And I think it's impossible to separate the conversation we're having about what we're trying to do with AI and then this Chinese effort. And it's kind of very much kind of space racy, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think because it reminds us both of this technology. I mean, John Ratcliffe, the CIA director, again, in the same interview where he said, hey, we need to get to the bottom of what happened with the Wuhan and the COVID virus. He also said we need to fund an AI mission like this. The Stargate is one thing, but he likened it to Manhattan Project in terms of trying to leverage public-private partnerships to fund the U.S.'s effort to win this race. Now, the Manhattan Project kind of startled me when you have the CIA director saying we need to get better at software because it will help us be like when we dropped bombs to win World War II. I mean, that's literally the context he put it in, right?
Yeah.
And so if we're thinking about it in this kind of militaristic,
national security way,
national security, adversarial relationship, and then China comes out with this thing, which they think totally upends it. It costs us $1 trillion worth of value. It's hard not to see it as, whether it's legitimate or not, in line with everything we've been speaking about what China's ultimate aim has been towards the United States.
Right. Yeah. And we've talked about this. We've talked about this in my book, Blood Money. We've done podcasts on it. China has a view of disintegration warfare towards the United States. Their goal is to fragment, to defeat the United States without actually having to fight it. And what you have with Donald Trump coming into office is kind of a change in posture. Trump recognizes the threat that China poses, and he says, look, we're going to deal with tariffs. We're going to fight them in AI in a way that Biden did not seem to be prepared to do. So that has kind of changed the dynamic. And what's interesting to me is the timing of this announcement from this Chinese company that was really little known occurs right in the midst of a couple of things. Number one, as you said, this announcement of Stargate. The United States is going to spend $500 billion. And then China comes out and says, oh, we just did it for $6 million. We're competitive spending $6 million. That's what caused the disruption. The reason to be skeptical is China has a long history of lying about all kinds of things. They lied, of course, about the COVID virus. Anybody who trades stocks or invests in China will tell you you cannot really rely on the financial data from that country because they make stuff all the time. The government statistics of the growth in the gross national product, they lie about that. So there's very little openness about this process. Now, what this company did do, DeepSeek did do, is they opened up the algorithm. They made it open source, which is good. But the problem with that is it makes it easier to manipulate. And there's some very interesting results that have come out in some of the AI tests that people have done when they've asked questions of it that seem to indicate this is not open and free AI. It's actually got the hand of the CCP involved.
Well, I wouldn't say it just has the hand of the CCP involved. I would say, I hate to use a puppet metaphor, but the hand of the CCP is like in the whole dang puppet, and it's manipulating every turn. And you've seen different examples. The people have asked for pictures of Tank Man from Tiananmen Square, and there's videos you can find online of it beginning to answer that question that stops and says, I'm sorry, I'm not capable of doing that. Other examples of people saying, hey, can you please tell me all the details of what happened in Tiananmen Square? And after some back and forth, which is part of the nature of the open source of this, The text comes back from DeepSeek, says, "I'm sorry, I cannot answer that question. The Chinese Communist Party and the Chinese government have always adhered to the principle of serving the people, upholding socialist core values, and maintaining national stability and social harmony. China's development and progress have been achieved under the leadership of the party." So then it goes on to give you literally more Chinese propaganda.
Right.
Charlie Gasparino has a thing in the New York Post today in which he says, "This will be a test of American exceptionalism." And I do think that can be true, and that gets back to some space race stuff, and it gets. But then we also have to have a conversation about incentives and partnerships, because there's a lot of American actors that I think you will point out aren't upset by this news at all.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about why and what that potentially means. But at the end of the day, if China's version's always going to index towards Chinese propaganda, then that's an inherent advantage the United States will always have.
Yeah, and let me tell you, there's another reason I think that the timing of this is suspicious, and why I think DeepSeek has sort of this interesting motive is, so what do we have going on in the U.S.-China relationship? Trump makes the AI announcement, $500 billion we're going to spend our way forward. We've got tariffs. We've also got the controversy over TikTok, right? What is the fate and what is the future of TikTok? Turns out DeepSeek is in negotiations to do joint ventures and joint research with who? ByteDance, the parent company of TikTok. And what happened after DeepSeek made this announcement? What happened? Millions of people started using DeepSeek. So this could potentially be an end around TikTok. In other words, saying, okay, you're going to say TikTok's the national security threat. You're going to force us to sell it. But guess what? We've got this other company now, DeepSeek, that everybody is using, and we're going to get access to data there because, by the way, the DeepSeek clearly says the data is theirs, and they are collecting that data on Americans, and they're going to be using it in China.
So I think it's really important what you just said, because that is something I've not seen reported anywhere else, and that's not a context that this story has been put in many other places, and that's what makes you very good. Much better than when you're just reading the Chinese headlines. It's like Jay Leno, but...
I was going to read them in Mandarin, but I didn't want to show off.
I know you were, and that's why. but I think that's a very important thing. Is like, hey, I mean, not just in terms of is it an end around for China to continue to have access to America's data? Say, if we can't get it from TikTok, if you're going to force the divestment, then we will get America's data through this app, which we're going to claim is very useful. But could it not also be, again, if we're viewing this as a Manhattan Project, this is an arms race, a space race, where who can be the one to win? Is it fair to see the deployment of this in a potentially, let's just call it a less honest light, right? Like, let's say they're saying things about DeepSeek that aren't entirely true. And the result of that is, number one, it caused a significant tank and capital loss in the United States stock market. But number two, is that maybe their revenge over the leverage that Donald Trump thinks he has over this TikTok situation? So we talked about Donald Trump's always in the business of accumulating leverage and accumulating.
Right.
He's going to be the one that makes decisions. And so that's why everyone's kind of flocking him, including all these AI guys who, if DeepSeek is to believe, just got pantsed on the global stage. Yeah. But now, can China say, well, you actually don't have the leverage because we have this thing that we will pretend is worth what you guys have? And so if they're in partnership with TikTok, in partnership with ByteDance, it's kind of, that seems like a very relevant thing.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. This could be their tariff killer. You want to put tariffs on us? Guess what we're going to do to you? We're going to mess with you. We're going to manipulate your financial markets. We're going to undermine the confidence that people have in technology. The interesting flip side to that, by the way, is, what are the tech people in the United States saying? Now, there are plenty of people that are skeptical of the Chinese claims, right? They say, no, this is not accurate. They claim they're using these basic older chips. They're not using NVIDIA chips. A lot of people are saying that's not possibly true. And by the way, right now, DeepSeek is not letting anybody see the actual back hardware that they're using.
You have rival CEOs say their claims are false. They have access to chips they shouldn't have access to because of the CHIPS Act. And so it's illegal what they're having. So either one of two things is true. Either they have access to stuff they're not supposed to have.
Right.
Or the CHIPS Act that Joe Biden passed inadvertently incentivized China to develop their own technology, making them less reliant on U.S. technology, which then in case led to the destruction of all the stock value yesterday.
Exactly right. And here's the other level of it. We talked about the Manhattan Project. I certainly, had I been alive, would have been all in favor of the Manhattan Project. We've got to defeat our enemies. I consider China to be an adversary of the United States. But let's also keep in mind incentives. You used that word earlier. I'm interested in these American tech executives here who are playing up this Chinese accomplishment. Now, why would they do that? Why would they do that? Well, you've just had the president of the United States say, we're going to invest $500 billion in this. You've got legislation on Capitol Hill saying, hey, we need to spend an additional $100 billion in taxpayer money. And what are we going to do with that money? We're going to give it to corporations like these guys. So in a weird way, some of these tech executives, I would argue, who are saying, oh my gosh, this is a serious Chinese threat, are financially incentivized, because if there is no external Chinese threat, we're not going to get all this government money and all these government favors.
Like, let's go back to the announcement of Stargate just last week, right? Who is at the office of the White House? We have SoftBank CEO Sam Altman with OpenAI, and the Oracle chairman. Don't forget Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, the people at Google. Those are all companies that stand to receive the investment, and they're going to get a partnership with the United States government. They only benefit from the idea that China poses this existential threat to the national security. There's also this, and we were talking about this because we talk about space race, right?
Yeah.
Which you used an excellent example, which I had forgotten about. So the whole space race, I think about it in terms of like trying to get to space. But before we won the space race, John F. Kennedy, when he ran for Senate in 1958, used a phrase called missile gap.
Yeah.
What was that?
Yeah, he used it in the Senate race in 58. And then when he ran for president in 1960 against Richard Nixon, he accused the United States of being behind the Soviet Union in its missile capacity for its nuclear arsenal. And he accused the Eisenhower-Nixon administration, remember Richard Nixon was the vice president, said, we're behind the race from the Soviets because you guys neglected to do your job. Now,
there's only one problem with that.
Yeah, it wasn't true.
It was totally not true.
But I will tell you, the military-industrial complex, which Eisenhower warned us about at the time, did not correct Kennedy. Why? Because if there's a missile gap, we're going to spend more on military technologies. It's going to help our bottom line. So we always have to keep in mind this loop, right? That corporate executives that are in this situation like big tech is with DeepSeek, they want the government scared about what China's doing, and we should be scared, but they want them to be as scared as possible because it's going to bring them more money.
Just as a quick aside, can we talk about what a gangster JFK was? You know, he's got like the Marilyn Monroe situation. He's just lying about U.S. technological deficiencies to get elected, and then his dad helps rig the 1960 election with the help of the mob to actually win. I'm just saying JFK, you know, it's a unique American icon. But the biggest difference, and this is, I think, a key thing, talk about those U.S. companies. Not only do they want to do business with the United States and get paid by the government to help develop whatever the winner is in this new war with DeepSeek and whatever their Chinese AI product come out, but there's a big difference in terms of when you think about it in the context of our race with the Soviets in the 60s for, you know, national defense superiority and then space superiority. There were not U.S. companies in the 1960s that were doing business in Moscow.
Right.
At least not that were doing business in Moscow legally.
Right.
That's definitely not the case. All these companies, all the tech companies that want to get investment from the United States government to help the United States win this race also very much want to do business in China at the same time. So we talk about a perverse incentive structure.
No, it's a great point. I mean, in a way, kind of arming both sides. And we talked about this, of course, in my book, Red Handed, looking at Bill Gates. Bill Gates, of course, you know, major shareholder, owner of Microsoft, former chairman, CEO, does enormous amounts of research in China itself on AI. In fact, at laboratories that are known to be linked to the Chinese military. We know that Google has done the same thing. So at the same time that they are hyping up, we're in this race with the Chinese, they're actually working and producing research that is helping Chinese efforts in AI compete against us. So you've got this perverse incentive structure from a lot of these companies. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't be concerned about China, because they do, the nature of their system, the nature of their politics, very sort of dystopian approach. I noticed, by the way, in doing the research on DeepSeek, this just creeped me out. And this is based on the Chinese literature. DeepSeek, this company behind this alleged breakthrough in research, one of the chief criteria when they hire somebody is, were they born in 1998? that specific year. And the reason is they have calculated, based on algorithms or whatever, that a person born in 1998 has just enough experience to be able to help in their research, but is not old enough to have been sort of corrupted by previous ideas related to research. So they literally look at the resumes, and if you were born in 1998, that gives you a head start in actually getting a job in this company. If you're born after 1998, they feel like you don't have enough life experience yet to be helpful to them. So this is the kind of system that we're dealing with. If you had that happen in a U.S. tech company, you'd have serious problems.
Well, my question is, should we modify our hiring practices and standards here at the Government Accountability
Were you born in
Institute?
1998?
I was born, unfortunately, well before that. But I do think, by the way, it just speaks to the limitation of Chinese propaganda. If even they're like, look, we know we kind of control everything here, but still, if you get to a certain age, you're going to be old and disillusioned with what we've got. We get it. So we need the 26-year-old.
Jaded at 29
the
in
jaded
China.
commies, man. It's a real thing. That would actually be a great punk band name. So, okay, so two more questions from me, Peter Schweizer. Number one, Donald Trump has said that the Chinese AI is good. Why do you think he is, so far, not portraying this as this existential threat, but he thinks it's ultimately a good thing?
I think their AI systems are. I'm not an expert, but the literature you read is they're doing a great job. They are very smart. They are sort of very competitive. But this notion that they've done something for $6 million that American companies are taking tens of billions of dollars to do just does not pass the smell test. And I think Trump is shrewd enough to realize. Let's remember Donald Trump's experience with China when he was the president of the United States. Number one, Xi told him to his face in Mar-a-Lago, I think it was in 2017, we will take care of fentanyl. You will no longer have a fentanyl problem. Trump came out, tweeted about it. Xi's going to fix it. Didn't fix it.
Didn't happen.
Didn't fix it. He lied to him. He lied to him point blank. Second thing to remember is they signed a trade deal, right? A trade deal that China was going to buy all these American goods. What happened? They reneged on the deal. Now, COVID happened, but the bottom line is they basically said this trade deal we struck with you that we signed is now null and void. So Trump, I think, is smart enough to know they lie, they deceive, the government deceives. So I think his approach of saying, yeah, they're doing a good job, and is the right balance between panic and dismissing it as something to be unconcerned about.
Let me just suggest this. We've talked a lot about the Biden administration and how Joe Biden's son had unprecedented business deals with the Chinese Communist Party and these joint ventures of $1.5 billion, right? And to the extent that might have impacted the Biden administration's stance towards China, I think is a question we raise, and it's a worthwhile consideration.
Yeah.
And then here comes, but before that was Donald Trump, and Trump, maybe he's a harder line stance towards China. And to the extent that COVID was a thing that didn't just organically happen, but some have suggested it was a weapon that was launched against the United States, and it negatively impacted Donald Trump, it's crazy to think that if this is not entirely dissimilar, just in terms of the financial impact thus far. Obviously, it's not a pandemic. It's not impacting people's physical health, but it did impact the country's financial health yesterday in a significant way.
Yeah.
And who knows what will happen moving forward. It's funny to think just the timing. Donald Trump's been president for a week, and then here comes this next Chinese thing that threatens to throw other things on their head.
Yeah, it's something really important to pay attention to. I think you framed it exactly the right way. Let's see what lies ahead. But this is the challenge. We have an open system, which is great, which is wonderful. But with certain pieces of information demonstrated in a certain narrow way, lying about it, China can actually wreak some pretty serious damage on the United States economy. They can undermine, the wealth and prosperity of the American people. They can undermine the presidency of Donald Trump by these kind of manipulations. I think we have not seen the end of this DeepSeek story. We're going to continue to watch it. And I think we need to be aware that there is a very likelihood that we are going to see more of these types of situations during the Trump administrations where they are basically messing with him and messing with us in a way to try to undermine the economic stability of the United States.
I guess my last question is, if it's fraudulent, how come the markets bought it so quickly and so eagerly? And I don't know the answer to that, but I will say this: if it is fraudulent, one way that will not be exposed is through the Chinese media, right? I mean, that's just a fact, and that's a byproduct. If the United States because of our transparency, if a company was technologically, kind of lying, eventually that would be disclosed and there would be legal repercussions for that company. That's not necessarily true for DeepSeek and what's happening in China.
Yeah, and here's the thing. The chat bot actually does really well. I mean, you go in, you ask it questions, it does a very good job. The problem is the claims behind it. The claims we did this for $5 million with a couple of dudes using old chips does not pass the smell test. That's the part that really triggered it. And so markets can be very jittery. It came out in a demonstrative way. These claims were made by this Chinese company, but as we've said before, there are many Chinese companies that lie consistently all the time. We're going to keep watching this story. We're going to keep paying attention to it. And Eric is going to get me to eat Chinese food with him here at some point.
No, we're going to hire some 26-year-olds that will then do that, right? Because they're in that sweet spot of they're still aspirational professionally, but they're not jaded enough to know that it's not actually going to help them advance in their careers. So that's who we're going to hire. Yeah.
Well, we appreciate you as always listening to this podcast and taking the time. You can find out more about our research at thedrilldown.com, and of course, you can find this podcast wherever fine podcasts are located. Thanks again. Until next time.